Winter is upon us. The longest night of the year is fast approaching. On Saturday, the solstice will confirm what our snow shovels, scarves, and gloves already testify. Ready or not, we've moved into the dark and frozen time of the year. How swiftly snow covers the memory of the blossoms of summer. How quickly ice coats the fields where the crack of the bat and ball sounded in a summer's night. How fully the freeze has erased our desire to linger where once we supped languidly on backyard barbecue. How quickly the past is hidden by snow. How fully memory is obscured by ice. How swiftly winter is all we see, all we know, all we remember. Winter is but a season. It will pass. And there's much natural beauty to be found while she dances among us. But there is a different kind of winter. There is a winter that lasts longer than a season. There's a winter that is unnatural and ugly. There's a winter that freezes itself into the heart of humanity. When we forget our history, when we forget where we've come from, when we forget the footprints we followed to get where we are, it is as if a great winter storm has covered up the foundations and formulations of life. When we forget that ours is not the only story on the planet, it is as if ice has coated our ability to see the truth. When we forget that we are not self-created, we have inextricably lost our capacity to face the challenges of the future. This is true for us as individuals. This is true for us as nations. This is true for us as a civilization. These days, most of the Western world is suffering from collective amnesia. And this is no truer than in regard to the Arab world and the Muslim faith. In regards to Islam, I think it is safe to say that a winter of discontent has gripped our Western world. A recent public opinion survey found that a majority of Americans see little or nothing to admire in Islam or the Muslim world. In their provocative book entitled Islamophobia, Making Muslims the Enemy, Peter Goschalk and Gabriel Greenberg write, get a piece of paper and brainstorm. Write down with as little thought and as much honesty as possible all the words that come to mind when you think of the word Islam or Muslim. Most Americans who have been asked to do this exercise, the authors say, have given an almost routine set of answers. The names and events they think of tend to be associated with violence. Osama bin Laden, the 9/11 tragedies, Palestinian suicide bombers, or ideas and practices associated with oppression, jihad, veiling, Islamic law, and to places limited to the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Iran. Now, to be sure, the authors say, some answers escape this pattern, such as boxer Muhammad Ali or hummus and pita bread. But these are relatively few. When asked about their answers, many Americans respond that, unfortunate as these associations may be, Muslims and Islam feature predominantly in many of the world's conflicts and injustices. And this, they often conclude, reflects something inherent about the religion and its associated cultures. Judging from the portrayals of Islam and Muslims in the American media, it's hard to argue with them. Gottschalk and Greenberg continue. However, these answers seem less certain in the face of certain facts. For instance, more Muslims live east of Afghanistan than west of it, rendering the Middle East a geographically minor place in the Muslim world. The nations with the most Muslims are, in order, Indonesia, Pakistan, India, and Bangladesh. And there are plenty of Muslims here in the United States as well. Harvard professor Diana Eck writes, there are more Muslim Americans than there are American Episcopalians, more Muslims in America than members of the Presbyterian Church, and as many American Muslims as there are American Jews. That is 6 million. In fact, according to Gottschalk and Greenberg, at least 1.5 billion people identify themselves as Muslims globally. That is 1 in 5 people. Now, the majority of these Muslims do not participate in political violence, and few aspire to establish an Islamic state in their own country, let alone force one on others. Almost all these Muslims live under civil laws fashioned after Western models, and relatively few seek to replace these with Sharia, Islamic law. Despite nearly 1,500 years of Jewish, Christian, and Muslim interaction, most Western Jews and Christians today are likely to depict Muslims as holding military jihad or holy struggle as a central tenet, although only a small minority of Muslims today and a small minority of Muslims historically over time have ever engaged in religiously motivated armed conflict. These days, the Muslim world is looked on as a place that fosters violence, lawlessness, and backward customs, a place so bereft of culture and self-sufficient structures that the West needs to come and rescue it. The Muslim world has become a place that needs the far superior West to guide its way on. As we prepare to send more troops into Afghanistan, it might be helpful for us to remember that there was a time when the Muslim world was actually the powerful protector of all things cultural, and that it was the Muslim world that rescued Europe from ignorance and ineptitude. The Dark Ages is considered the time in Western Europe between the collapse of the Roman Empire and the birth of the Renaissance, somewhere between 12 and 1400. The Dark Ages in Europe were an intellectual and cultural void. Author Jonathan Lyons writes, in the Dark Ages in Western Europe, daily life staggered under the burden of rampant violence and social instability. Bands of mercenaries, answerable to neither king nor God, prowled the countryside, their commander's word the only law in the land. Across Europe, primitive farming techniques could no longer keep pace with the growing population, and many were left impoverished and desperate. Violence, inflamed by the weakness of central political authority and uninhibited by the tenuous moral grip of the Catholic Church, violence was the currency of the day. And things were little better inside the few elite cathedral schools. Chaos and disorder had just about destroyed formal education. The wonders of the classical learning were all but forgotten. Invaluable texts were lost through inattention, destroyed by war, or rendered unintelligible by the general ignorance of would-be scholars, or simply lost by the inability to read Greek.